you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
I'm Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go. Welcome to the big show. We certainly appreciate family and friends. As always, the Chris Voss Show is the family that loves you but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as your mother-in-law does, because she never liked you anyway, and there's probably no hope. But to get on our good site, tell her to go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss One, the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Today, we have an amazing young man on the show with us today. He's going to be talking to us about his new book that just came out October 14th, 2023. Brian T. Bradley is on the show with us today. His new book is called Overexposed: How to Create Iron-Clad Protection for Your Wealth and Make Assets Untouchable with a Hybrid Trust. We're going to be talking about as well as insights there, what went into it, and some of his mindset behind it. And keep in mind, this is unlike my book that I wrote called Overexposed, about my years of streaking in New York City in an overcoat. So no one wants to see that book. Welcome to the show. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me on. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of important things to go over and talk about and keep it lighthearted. Some myth busting, and
we're not going lighthearted, man. We're punching with questions, man.
That's good.
We're going deep. We're going jiu-jitsu with it.
We're going jiu-jitsu deep.
We got a lot of
style.
Prison style. You got a lot of jiu-jitsu awards behind you there too, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a hobby turned into a passion, which turned into a world championship. And
congratulations.
If you're going to do something, you might as well go all in, right? And so,
there you go.
Same thing with the book, and same thing with jiu-jitsu. And I'm going to be flying out actually this weekend for a national competition, so we'll see how that goes.
There you go. If you're going to do something, go all out. That's what I say about my OnlyFans site. So, Brian, you're a nationally recognized asset protection attorney. You've been sought after for your expertise and insights, appearing as a featured guest on prominent shows, including The Chris Voss Show, The Chris Voss Show, and The Chris Voss Show. I'm just going to skip all the other mentions here, the plugs. You're recognized for your excellence in the legal field, your accolades. You've been named the best attorneys of America's List 2020, consecutively listed in Lawyers of Distinction list for 3 years running, Super Lawyers Rising Star, America's top High Stake 100 Litigators List, the 2017 Law Firm Award, and #1 bestseller of Overexposed. So you're doing so much. Give us a 30,000 overview of what this new book is, what's inside.
Yeah, the 30,000 foot view here is that our tort system is out of control. Our legal system is a mess, and what is the goal of most people? Build financial freedom, right? So we're working hard. We're trying to find investments, make some money, find some maybe in real estate, and next thing you know, don't want to lose it from a lawsuit, predatory legal system. So what do we got to do to protect ourselves from it? The sad part is what made me write the book is that there was no horn book on over what is even asset protection. And then when you tried to piece together what this information even was, you would find one piece of a pamphlet or book on LLCs, one on something else. And as people were searching around for information, I would get clients calling saying, we can't find any resources on this versus someone just pitching something for me to sell. So I realized there was a need for an overall educating book for people to just go out and understand the overall landscape of what is asset protection, the different tools, and why we even need it. And so I'm like, the book's not there. I'll go out and write it. I've been talking about it long enough. So let's just put the product out.
There you go. And not a lot of people get into this understanding of this field of protecting their assets and different variations of trusts and things like that. Why do you think that is? Why do you think people don't know more about it?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think about it a lot. I think I equate it to mortality. We don't go and get revocable living trusts or estate plans almost until it's too late. Or, excrement, grandpa died. Did he get a trust? No. Why? Because we generally don't want to think about the bad or mortality. And then next thing you know, something happens. Same thing in the world of asset protection. We're accumulating, we're buying, we're creating partnerships. We're in let's gather stage. Oh, shoot, I just got sued. Now what? Can I go protect myself? And then, unfortunately, then the people call attorneys like me, And the answer is, I'm sorry, you had to create the system in place beforehand, not after the fact, because it's all preventative planning. And so that's one of the reasons why. And I think there's an education gap as well. When you call and talk to an attorney, there's not very many asset protection attorneys. Most are estate attorneys, business attorneys, contract attorneys. They don't exclusively practice in this area of law. We're not taught this in law school. We don't have to take this on the bar exam. Your CPA is not an attorney. They're talking about taxes. So as you're trying to protect yourself, there's not much resources and people knowledgeable to go to. And when you call your attorney, you think it's kind of like a one-stop shop, like your doctor, right? But unfortunately, there's niches and specialties, and not everybody specializes in that area of law.
Very true. And I know from my past, talking to trust attorneys, some of them, they do a lot of counsel for the rich people. Rich people spend a lot of money to figure out trusts and protecting their assets. And so sometimes they get expensive. Like I remember someone a long time ago wanted to set up a trust for our companies, and they wanted $5,000 a pop. And we were like, okay.
Yeah, and it just depends on what type of trust that you're looking at and what the client's goal is. An estate plan attorney, for an estate plan, no, I wouldn't think it'd be that much. For an asset protection trust, completely different types of trust. You're going to be looking at $12,000 to $30,000, depending on the client profile, really, and what they have, what assets they have, and how strong it needs to be. So it's going to vary, but that's a great point you kind of brought up, though, is yes, the rich do it, but it's not just for the rich. Generally, the clients that need it are your neighborhood millionaire next door who's, a working nurse, firefighter who invested in some real estate, self-planning their retirement. Next thing you know, they need to protect the assets because that's what they're going to be living off of as they get older. So we need different types of trusts, not estate planning trusts to worry about probate, passing it on, death taxes. We need to protect the assets while you're living.
Yeah, and everybody, no one thinks they need an attorney till they need an attorney, right?
No, and that's the sad part about the asset protection world is once you realize you need an attorney, it's generally because, oh, God, I got sued. At that point, it's too late. It's just like trying to get insurance on your house after the house burns down. You got to think about it beforehand.
There's nothing nicer, too, than having that asset protection. I remember when we would get shakedown lawsuits with our corporations, they were C Corps. And I remember one of them said to us, I'm going to get your house and your cars and your money. And I was like, good luck with that. You're going to have to pierce the corporate veil, and we already know that game. And so they were pissed because they actually thought that they basically didn't do their homework to see that we were a C Corp.
and that's part of the game, right? Yeah. Is then looking at, okay, you may even have a valid lawsuit, but most of them are predatory. Yeah. And so when someone's trying to, prey on you for money, or they may have a valid claim, but then it's how much can you actually get access to? And depending on the business entities and the type of system you have in place, when I was doing a lot of plaintiff work, trial work, that's the first thing I would look at. Yeah, you may have a very valid claim and it may be worth $1 million in the judgment, but if the person I'm suing, I can't get access to the assets for executing the judgment on, I can't take your case because I'm going to end up going bankrupt.
Yeah. That's the thing that's so important. Every attorney I've ever talked to, and I guess tell me if this is true, but if they can't get the assets, if they're going to sue somebody on behalf of a client, if they can't find the assets and they're hidden in, for example, some of the trusts you're talking about, and I know those are supposed to be really hard to pierce, if not impossible, they're not going to do the suit because the suit's going to cost a fortune. Even piercing the corporate veil will cost you a fortune, discovery and all that stuff. And there's a certain point where it's just not worth it.
No, absolutely. Like the big claim cases or like the medical malpractice ones where, those don't go through, and piercing the veil on those is generally not too difficult. There's a lot of case law on piercing the veils on there. So if you're talking about like the pizza man slipping, grandma falling down and getting hurt, breaking something, the corporate veil will help out with that. If we're looking at just holding real estate into a holding company, for example, and then you're getting sued, the veil will probably be pierced depending on where you set them up. And every state's going to be different, right? Some states, Arizona, Nevada, Wyoming, have really strong charging order protection, kind of like what you're hinting at. Some of them suck, like Oregon, California, East Coast, West Coast. There's no protection with those LLCs. So that's why we add more layers as we go along.
Yeah, and I remember we had a courier company, and so they were talking about individually taking the cars and putting them into trusts. Because if one of those cars hits someone and it caused an injury, we could lose our whole company. And so putting them into different things. So through the title of your book, you talk about what a hybrid trust is.
Yeah.
So tell us what a hybrid trust is, maybe how it's different than other variations of trust.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about the world of asset protection, right, like we're going to have different layers first. So when you start thinking about winter, you're going to have like base layer. That's going to be like an LLC, like the thin shirt on your skin. Mid layer will be like a management company, like a merino wool sweater cardigan. For your asset protection trust, that's the third layer. The third layer, the really bad weather layer, that's going to be your asset protection trust. Mm-hmm. When we talk about trust, like we were hinting at, they're not all the same. You got your estate plan. That's going to be for when you die to pass assets on, or the revocable living trust, avoid probate. Asset protection trusts are completely different. You can either create them offshore, onshore. The strongest one in the world was created in 1984, the very first to market. That was the famous Cook Island Trust, the unstoppable, unpenetrable trust. Pros of that, super strong, statutory non-recognition, but con, very, very expensive, a lot of IRS disclosures. So 10 years later, the U.S. didn't want to have, money shipping off somewhere else. So we started creating them in some of the states in the U.S., domestic trust, asset protection trust. Mm-hmm. Pros of that, cheaper to start. Right, you're not talking about like $50,000 to start. You're generally talking about $12,000. Con is they're not very effective. Unfortunately, over the last 10, 15 years now, we've had a lot of case law, even states that recognize them, just completely piercing them.
Wow.
So the hybrid trust came about 30 years ago, which is just like a hybrid car, right? We're combining the best of both worlds. Take the strength of the offshore trust, domesticate it through the IRS, so it's cheaper and no IRS compliance. Mm-hmm. And now you have the best of both. And that's kind of like falls in the middle price range, generally around like $23,000 to set up. Wow. And that's what a hybrid bridge trust is. It's the most flexible, strong trust. I think the offshore purely is way overkill for 99.9% of people. And at the end of the day, I can't condone using a domestic trust and spend $12,000 on something that then is being found out to not be very effective.
Yeah.
So, we're starting to find more and more people just buying false sense of securities, right? I got my trust, I'm good to go. And the next thing you know, you get sued and you find out that you got pierced and it's not working. That's the last position you want to be in.
Yeah, because then you're just as open to everything as possible. The nice thing is people can buy your book for $17.95 instead of paying $50,000. So there you go.
There you go. And then you can learn about the whole world right there. Great investment.
There you go. So what would I put into a hybrid trust? What are some of the things I'm looking to protect as a person?
Yeah. So what you want to protect, right, yourself is from risk. And so when we're looking at our assets, we're looking at different things like what is the asset class in? So is it a risky asset? What's a risky asset? Things that have keys, things that need insurance on, things that can go boom and hurt people. So you're looking at planes, you're looking at some people like have boats, rental properties, business entities. All those are very risky, right? You can get sued from those things. So those wouldn't go into the trust. They would actually go into LLCs to separate out the risk. Okay. And then those would flow up into generally a management company. So it's easier to file taxes on. It gives you another layer, just one tax filing versus 10 if you have 10 LLCs, right?
Yeah.
And then what would own that management company? Instead of you personally, your trust would own the management company.
Oh, wow.
So you would be managing the management company as a managing member, and the trust itself will own the management company. And then your only thing that would go directly into that trust would be your primary residence, because you don't want to lose your tax benefits from your home, right? Like writing off the interest and all that. So your primary would go directly into the trust, but then God forbid some big event of duress happens and you're going to probably lose everything. That trust can do what's called a unilateral withdrawal on demand. Big fancy legal word. What it means is saying, hey, limited partnership, I own you, give you my assets, and I'm disconnecting from you, and we're disappearing. Wow. And that's the benefit of having the trust own the management company, not you.
Oh, wow. That makes sense. Here I thought a hybrid trust was just a trust that had electric and gas.
Right.
What about for business? What if I'm a business owner? Maybe I have multiple companies or multiple interests in companies. Is there something for that?
Absolutely. So as long as it's not an S Corp, right? Like most CPAs will create a lot of business structures because someone will call in their CPA and say, hey, I want to create a business and I don't want to pay that much in taxes. First thing the CPA is going to say is, all right, let's create an S Corp. That's great for taxes, but if we start owning assets, horrible for owning assets in, because once you get sued, I can't move assets out of an S corp without you owing all the deferred taxation back to the IRS. Most people don't have that kind of money just sitting around in their bank, so the assets get frozen. So what we would generally recommend is, depending on what the business is, I would not recommend an S corp. Like C corps are fine. We can put C corps into limited partnerships. I can put LLCs into limited partnerships. If you were to use an S corp, I would say put the assets. For example, if you're you brought up like truck bedding, right, in the past. So if you'd be operating like a truck bed company and you have 50 trucks, put the trucks in different LLCs and then lease them back to the S corp. So let the S corp be the basing, have the money come into the S corp for tax purposes. Have the assets owned outside in LLCs and just lease them back to the company. That way, if the S corp gets sued, at least your assets, like your truck beds, or if you're a doctor, like your medical equipment, aren't going to be taken. You can keep working.
There you go. That's really smart. I think that's what they advised back in the day. And so tell us about, what else have we covered that's in the book before we move on?
Yeah, I think a good one to kind of go in is just like maybe define what even asset protection is, because I think there's a big misconception for people on what is this mysterious word.
Let's do that.
Yeah, so asset protection is not estate planning, right? That's more when we die. It's asset protection is simply placing a legal barrier between your assets and a potential creditor, like the person suing you, right? Before it's needed. That's it. It's just a barrier. Think of it like a safe that we're going to put our gold or our guns or anything of value in. Anything of value we want to put behind that legal barrier and out of our personal name, so that it's not easily attached with a lien or reached with a judgment. But it's not hiding money or moving assets to, not pay or avoid paying taxes. That's illegal. You're taxed on your worldwide income if you're a U.S. resident. And I get this call a lot, right? Like people saying, hey, Brian, I want to create an asset protection plan. I don't want to pay taxes. I'm sorry, that's not what these systems are for. They're not designed for that. And so the two big takeaways on that really is just that asset protection, again, not to avoid paying taxes. So please don't call saying, I want asset protection to avoid paying taxes. And it has to be created before you're being sued. And I talk about the timing of creating an asset protection plan in my book, and fraud also a lot, because those are the critical elements and the stages for the asset protection plan to even work for it to be effective.
There you go. So talk to us about how people can onboard off your website, what you do there with your work at your agency, Bradley Legal Corp.
Yeah, so if you just want to have my website set up for more educational, informational, you can go on there, click the contact page, www.btblegal.com, and click the calendar link, and you'll immediately get an option to pick whatever works for you, set your schedule. Once you get the appointment set up, you're generally just going to talk to me personally. I like to actually talk to the clients one-on-one, not pass you off to somebody else, kind of give you like an actual good free assessment. And then from there, you can go and do whatever you want. Take the assessment and go to somebody else. If you want to sign up with us and we're both a good fit for each other, beautiful. I'd rather just have people have a good evaluation than a bad one, and then give you some case law so that when you start talking to other firms, you can actually ask questions and say, hey, what about this case? How's this apply to me? And see what they have to say. That way, you have a good foundation to go from.
There you go. And that's always important. Now, are you licensed, and can you talk to everybody across the nation, or are there only certain places you can do?
Yeah, great question. So I'm licensed in California, Oregon, Washington. I used to be licensed in Michigan, but I don't plan on moving back to Michigan.
Too cold.
It's too cold. Yeah, I couldn't handle -4. Like I lived right on Lake Michigan, and it was just too brutal. But what we do for asset protection wise is national. Okay. So we have over 3,000 clients nationwide. It's transactional work, so I can represent a client anywhere, and we have over 100 attorneys now affiliating with us in every state. So wherever somebody's at, you're going to end up talking to me or my partner Doug, and then from there, we got you covered.
Okay. On your website, you have something called the Bridge Trust. Is this the same thing that we've been talking about?
Yeah, that's the hybrid trust. It used to be called, I forgot what the original name was 30 years ago now, but we changed it to the Bridge Trust because it now just relates the principle easier of how we're connecting two countries together with a bridge. And then God forbid something happens, we're breaking the bridge and utilizing the strength.
There you go. There you go. That's important. So they set a lot of these up in Cook Islands?
The Cook Islands, yeah. So you have different options to set up offshore. You can go to the Cook Islands. You can go to the Belize. You can go to the Caymans. So the question is like, all right, why the Cook Islands? They were first to market, they're the best, and they're not considered tax havens. So you're not going to get flagged or dinged by the IRS and audited because of that.
Oh.
They don't even dip their toe in taxes. The issue when you go to, for example, like Belize or the Caymans, is that they're considered tax havens and people trying to hide money. So one, you're going to get dinged and most likely audited. And they have they have other trades. They have tourism, they have cane, sugar cane. They have other trade agreements with the US and the EU, which allows our legal system to get into those trusts. And then they always have to create a back door to the Cook Islands. So if you have to create a back door there, you might as well just use the strongest one there and cut out the BS. Is it going to cost more? Yes, but that's the strength of it. But like I said, do you want to go purely foreign? No, I'd rather it be a bridge trust or a hybrid. That way we have the strength in the back pocket, like a contractor building a house. We got all the tools, we just may not need to use them all the time. Let's keep the strength in the back pocket, domesticate it through the IRS. So we don't have to do the IRS disclosures, tax disclosures, FACTA disclosures. It's cheaper to maintain. And now we have a good working flexible trust.
There you go. There you go. What have we covered and talked about in the show so far?
I would say some of the misconceptions, like we were talking about, LLCs and veil piercing, but we didn't really get into, I think, what the problem with some LLCs are.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah. So when we go back to that weather analogy, right? LLCs, layer number one, base layer. It's entry level asset protection. Generally, you're going to have 0 assets, maybe 2 or 3 rental properties. We're just starting out. You're a greenhorn investor. You're just starting out your business. So there's a lot of confusion that comes into play on like, where do we even set these LLCs up in, right? We hear about Delaware, Wyoming, Texas, Nevada. And what we're talking about is charging order protection and corporate veil piercing, right? Like big fancy legal words. And so we have to remember first that LLCs began in the 70s. The goal was blending the elements of corporations and partnerships without the downside of double taxation, being taxed twice. Asset protection for LLCs was never the end goal. So by nature, they aren't actually that strong. And they tell us this straight up in their name, right? Like limited. They're not hiding the facts. And so one of the benefit is, we have this limited veil, right? The veil is better than nothing, but it is fragile and it can be pierced. Think of the veil like that thin, flimsy piece of fabric that covers a bride's face on her wedding day. It's not going to be a chastity belt. So let's say, for example, it's California real estate that you're owning and you're a California resident and you set up a Wyoming LLC. And then you go and you're holding like a key piece of California real estate in this Wyoming LLC. And you're paying California franchise tax on this out-of-state Wyoming LLC. What you've done is just convert your Wyoming LLC to a California LLC because you're doing business in the state of California. You're paying franchise tax in California. But if you ever have a liability issue in California, meaning a lawsuit, right? The judge in California is going to apply California law, not Wyoming law, because there's no legal nexus to Wyoming. There's no connection. And there's a really beautiful case law that just came out on this. It's a 2023 Supreme Court case named Mallory versus Norfolk, Norfolk. And this was where the Supreme Court upheld a Pennsylvania statute that forces companies to face litigation within its borders that it's registered to do business in. So I'm going to repeat that because it's actually really important. It forces companies to face litigation within the borders that is registered to do business in. So state courts are now permitted to exercise jurisdiction over registered foreign corporations that are, let's say, holding your real estate. So you don't just take Wyoming or Delaware tort and damage and personal injury laws with you to other states. You can't just go and purchase other states' more beneficial laws. And the second part of it is actually really important because there's a big distinction between business law and tort law. You see, sadly, people confuse business law and contract law with tort and personal injury liability. So when we're setting up, a business and creating business contracts, or like Chris and I decide, let's go sell widgets, nationally, we can and we should include choice of law clauses and venue provisions. We see them in every contract we ever sign, right? Saying what state laws are going to apply. That's completely fine. But when we're setting up businesses to sell, like widgets or a product in different states, we do want those good choice of law clauses because it's going to govern our internal disputes and affairs of our business. But when it comes to investing in, let's say, real estate, all right, and we're using LLCs as a holding company, that's not a business. When you get sued off of that property because of an injury, right, or your LLC gets sued, You're getting sued for damages from wrongful doings and big fancy word called negligence. That's not a business dispute. That's a tort liability. So you're completely talking about different areas of law. And so cases like tort liabilities, they don't relate to internal affairs or corporate governance matters. So you really don't have any corporate veil protection when it comes to that. So it's really important to pay attention to what are we creating these entities for? Is it for an actual business like we're selling widgets, or are we using them as holding companies to hold investment properties? Because then we're going to actually have to understand the corporate veil structures and the next layers that we have to add because of it.
There you go. I mean, it's so important to understand these things, and my God, my head's just spinning with the details of all these.
I try to keep
a lot of layers.
Fun, I try to keep it not legalese and as fun as possible, but sometimes it's just the devil's in the details.
There's a lot of layers.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's really important. What else haven't we talked about that we should educate people on?
Yeah, I think kind of like how we got here would be like, okay, like why do I even care about asset protection? Like how messed up is this world? You know, like what are we trying to protect ourselves from?
Yeah. So how did we get here?
Yeah. So what ended up happening is we just, over the last 40 years, we had a lot of changes that happen in the law. Like it's no longer about justice. It's about redistributing wealth from the haves to the have-nots. It's kind of like Robin Hood economics now. And a lot of this changed when we started allowing attorneys to advertise. And this then created a predatory legal system. And then we started creating this endless victim class. And then when we start stapling it on, like our current economic system is just completely upside down right now, and the governments need more access to money. So what they're doing is looking for people who have more so that they can start taking it and then funding the government or funding other needs. And so it's basically coming after Robin Hood economics, your money that they're going to need. And so we have to protect ourselves from that. Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of people who want your money, basically, is what you're saying.
No, anybody, we have sadly created this victim class. If we take like a macroeconomic global look at things, like the big picture really is that on top of this destroyed legal and tort system that we have, we're living in this global financial system that has these structurally deep-rooted issues. And we got government-backed fiat currencies that are in question. This is also including the U.S. dollar, right? Like the U.S. is not exempt from any of this. And then monetary policy that we're living in right now, right? Inflate or die. And we got, again, governments looking for these deep and accessible pools of financing, meaning your money and your assets. And then financial repression, monetary and economic manipulation. So this is the world that we're investing in. And so we have to take all of this under consideration and then start creating the systems that are going to work to protect your assets for you.
And there you go. Everyone wants your money. I mean, I've had money in my companies and got my shakedown lawsuits. You know, I have people say, why are you suing me? Because you have money. It's one of those things that comes with the territory. And people are like, you should have, been a better person than people want to see you. I'm like, I don't think you understand how the world works.
The harder you work, the more visibility you're going to have, and the more potential for other investments you're going to have. More investments means more risk. More risk is because your little red button on your back is growing. The bigger your red button gets, the more opportunity people are going to have to push it and see you. And you can even not have very many assets. For example, you can be a new medical doctor just out of residency with an insane amount of school debt, wearing your nice white coat. The first thing, what did most doctors do once they get out of residency? I'm going to go buy my BMW or a Porsche. I'm going to go buy two because I've deferred long enough. And so now they're driving their BMW or their Porsche with their white coat. And next thing you know, they get in a fender bender. What's going to happen? I'm going to sue the rich doctor now. And you may not even have that much.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they think you got money. And everybody wants to sue. This has been really insightful. Anything more we need to tease out to people before we go? No,
I think we've covered a lot. And from there, I would just say if you really want to do a deep dive, pick up the book. If you want to, get a hold of me, feel free to reach out, and I'd offer a free 1-hour consultation.
There you go. Free 1-hour consultation, folks. You can figure it out and get all the good stuff. Plus, you can order the book online. Give us your .coms and wherever you want people to find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, so you can reach me at www.btblegal.com. Feel free to email me, Brian@btblegal.com. and also have a new company that's getting set out, Bradley Business Consulting, where my fiance and I are combining both of our powers to help people leverage out and grow their leadership development using like DISC assessments, Hogan assessments, starting to optimize their talent more. So we're putting that out more. So if people also want some DISC assessments and help their company grow a little bit better and understand their personality indexes of themselves and their employees, that will be helpful for them as well. So you can jump on my website for there. I got all this information for you on the website, and feel free to grab a copy of the book. You can click the link on my website to get access to the book as well.
There you go. It's been wonderful to have on the show. Thank you for coming on. We certainly appreciate it, Brad.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
There you go. Order the book wherever fine books are sold. Overexposed: How to Create Iron-Clad Protection for Your Wealth and Make Your Assets Untouchable with a Hybrid Trust, out October 14th, 2023. Thanks for my honest for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss, one of the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. And that should